Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, October 30th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Penn State game in 2 days, the game against Michigan in 30 days. If you are planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at gratefulgriddleoh.com. All right, in today's show, you're going to get to hear a bunch from Ryan Day from his press conference earlier in the week. This was one of the better press conferences we've had all season long with him. Lots of interesting stuff. Obviously, helps to have an interesting opponent this week, even if Penn State is not having quite the season that everyone anticipated. Plenty of fascinating storylines as well. The return of Jim Knowles to Columbus. You'll hear Ryan Day's thoughts on Jim Knowles. You'll hear Ryan Day's thoughts on why the defense is maybe even better this year. You'll hear Ryan Day's thoughts on Matt Patricia and what he's done as sort of a little bit of a contrast with Jim Knowles. You're also going to hear at the very end one of my favorite Ryan Day press conference answers since he's been the head coach at Ohio State, going back even to his interim time at 2018. It has been a minute since Ryan Day took over at Ohio State. This was one of my favorite press conference questions and answers of that whole time, so you get to hear that as well. So, all right, before we get to that, going to get to more of the sort of traditional stuff for this week. One of the questions was about Penn State's new starting quarterback, Ethan Grunkemeyer. Of course, the regular starter, Drew Aller, he suffered a season-ending injury at the end of the Northwestern game. So that is one former Ohio high school star down. Another Ohio high school star steps into his place. Grunkemeyer, of course, is from Olentangy High School in Lewis Center, just north of Columbus. So he's having a little bit of a homecoming game this weekend. What were Ryan Day's impressions of Grunkemeyer during recruiting and then now on film?
Yeah, I think he's a very talented young man. He's, anybody you speak to up in the Olentangy High School or in the area growing up, he's got a great family. He's a great leader and, very intelligent, competitive player that, has a bright future in the game. And, this is just his second start, but you can see the talent on the field. You can see, that he's got leadership skills, and he obviously had a great career here while he was in high school, and, think very, very highly of him.
There are a couple different assistant coach angles this week with Ohio State and Penn State. One is that Jim Knowles left Ohio State for Penn State after last season. So Ryan Day has lost assistant coaches before, and of course he could potentially lose assistant coaches again at some point in the future. There, of course, have been rumors about Brian Hartline and maybe being linked to the Penn State job. Just calm your bodies if you are concerned about the idea that he was in State College last weekend. No, of course not. That's stupid. Don't pay attention to that. You may hear his name linked to these jobs. He may even take a job. He was not in State College last weekend. Relax. Okay, so how do you protect yourself, though, as a head coach, or how do you prepare yourself maybe for the fact that, hey, you've lost assistant coaches before, it might happen again in the future?
Yeah, just keep winning and continue to have opportunities is the goal. And that's part of the understanding of being unselfish, whether it's players or coaches. And we know that when we're unselfish and we win as a team, there's great opportunity for everybody in their careers. And that's a good thing. We want to make it great for guys to stay in the program, players and coaches, and retain as many people as we can, knowing that 100% is unrealistic, but that's why we want continuity. That's why we want stability. I think that's a big focus for us right now, to make sure that we have that, because in a day and age when you're just seeing a lot of changes in the game right now, I think you've heard a lot of coaches get up and say, there's been a lot of changes. The college landscape has changed with NIL, with transfer portal. Well, I think you're seeing that on the field now. You're seeing teams that maybe haven't been, historically in the top 10 or top 15 that now are in the top 10, top 15. And so all of the changes that have happened in terms of roster building, roster management, and things like that are now happening on the field. And it's just, a reflection of that. And so, we want to make sure that we're retaining all of our players and all of our coaches so that it is it's an edge for us against our competitors.
When Ohio State announced that Matt Patricia was its new defensive coordinator earlier this season, replacing Jim Knowles, the reaction was, well, let's just say mixed. There was a lot of, why on earth would they hire that guy? Did you see what he did with the Lions? And it's a lot of stuff in that vein. So then I think a lot of those people would probably have been very surprised to learn that Matt Patricia has not only been incredibly successful on the field, top defense in the nation right now by a whole lot of different metrics, but also incredibly popular off the field as well. Players seem to love him, seems to have a great relationship with guys. We see him in the Woody all the time, hanging out, talking to players for half an hour, 45 minutes after practice, just relaxing, hanging out, having conversations, being a normal human being with the players. So why has he been able to connect with this group so well?
I mean, everybody has their own style, and I think when he got in here, he had a certain list of things that he wanted to get done early on, and I think he's done that. He's let his personality go, which has been great, and each year you have a different set of dynamics at play, coaches and players, and that journey has its own story. So, I think he understands more than anybody that the season's just begun now. We're just getting started here. We've had the first half of the year, and that's great. But this is what really matters. And his history of coaching in the NFL, helps him give some perspective to everybody of just how long of a run this is. Those of us who went through it last year, that's one thing. But he's done it for multiple years, and you got to keep building each week. And I know that he understands that, and he's continuing to talk to the staff and the players about that as well.
One of the big storylines of Patricia's defense this fall is the fact that they've used multiple fronts. You have certainly heard our buddy Ross Fulton, our X's and O's guru, talking about that a whole lot of weeks this fall. So was that something that they really wanted to do? Is that something they're doing to sort of take advantage of the skill sets of someone like Arvell Reese? What's the deal with the multiple fronts, and how does Arvell Reese maybe factor into that?
Yeah, I think you always want to put the best players you can on the field to do their job the best they can. So what does that mean? Well, I think sometimes you recruit to certain schemes, but then you also want to make sure you're doing things that put guys in situations that can be successful. And what I mean by that is if somebody is a really, really good football player but maybe a non-fit schematically, do you add them to the team? And I think you always want to acquire talent the best you can. It's the coach's job to put them in a position to be successful. So you're seeing, I think this year, last year we had, Jack, JT, Ty, and Tyleek, and it was 4 down, and that's kind of what it looked like most of the plays. Now you're seeing, different guys with different skill sets who can do versatile things, and Arvell's one of those guys, and our coaches are making sure that we're putting those guys in those positions. So that's all part of the conversation. But bringing Matt in was important because he had a history of doing that.
This week's Penn State game is not what it was sort of expected to be back in the summer when the Nittany Lions were number one nationally by a lot of sources and number one in the Big Ten by even more sources. So this season obviously has not gone the way anyone in State College probably anticipated. They have lost 4 games. They've lost their head coach. They've lost a starting quarterback. But of course, they do have still a talented group of players. A lot of those guys who made them a preseason national title contender or a national title favorite, they're still there. It's not like they're out of good players. So how do you convey that to this year's Ohio State team that, hey, don't look at the 3-4 record. This is still a really talented Penn State team that's coming into town.
Well, it's already been conveyed to them, and it'll continue to be conveyed. We have a 2:30 meeting here, as you know. Tuesdays are a big day. We'll go through, what we think in terms of all 3 phases. But we know that this is, one of the top 5-10 teams in the country. I don't think there's many teams in the country that have more talent than Penn State has. And I think people recognize that early in the season. Sure, it hasn't gone the way they've wanted it to, but that doesn't change that they still have really good players. And when you looked at this game, a few months ago, I mean, it was an absolute matchup game. That has not changed. It's still the same players other than the quarterback. And so our guys know that. They understand that, and they know that it's about us. It's not about our opponent. And so we'll focus on our preparation, but you need to know your opponent. And these are very, very talented players, and they have a lot of NFL players, and we know they have really good coaches. So all of that's going to lead into a huge matchup game for us on Saturday.
On one of the shows earlier this week, you got a chance to hear from Penn State interim coach Terry Smith. He talked about a bunch of different stuff about how they are really going to have to be aggressive. He's also used the phrase emptying the clip a few times and really just whatever they got, they're going to shoot it out there and see what happens. So between that and the fact that they're coming off a week off and therefore have a lot more time to prepare and just scheme up some crazy stuff, Is this sort of an expect the unexpected game for the Buckeyes?
They really have a nothing to lose mentality. So, we have to be on high alert at all times for things. They have 2 weeks to put together different things on offense, defense, and special teams that they haven't put on film. We know that. And certainly when you have a coaching change like they did, we expect that. So, like you said, you have to expect the unexpected, be on high alert, know that they sort of have, that mentality going into the game. And so all of those things matter. At the end of the day, you still got to go play the play, and you don't know what's going to come, but we have to understand what our opponent is, and the fact that they've had 2 weeks to prepare and change up the looks.
One of the storylines going into the Buckeyes week off last week was, will there be a change on the offensive line, the right guard position in particular? We had seen Josh Padilla rotating in periodically for Tegra Shabola, and Shabola's play was not great in the last couple of weeks. So what's the update on the right guard spot? And I'm going to read between the lines here. Doesn't sound like there's a change coming at starter.
Well, I think that Josh Padilla has continued to practice well. When he's gotten to games, he's played well. He's not perfect. And so, we feel like he has an opportunity to, mix in there as the sixth offensive lineman in the game like he's been the last few games. We'll continue to evaluate it this week and figure out what gives us the best chance to win. But he certainly has played into one of our top 6 players.
There are always concerns for every team, and I think Ohio State fans have been pretty concerned about the Buckeyes' run game this season. But what's interesting is you don't really hear that same sense of concern, and certainly not a sense of panic, coming from inside the Woody about the rushing attack. They've been efficient, but really not explosive. So where are things on the running game right now for the Buckeyes? And you're going to hear Ryan Day talk about something that Ross has talked about before on shows this fall, the fact that the passing game off of RPOs, really, they kind of consider that an extension of the run game.
I say it all the time. At every play, we want to score a touchdown on. So every play should be an explosive in my mind. And when we're out at the practice field and on the scout team and it doesn't go for an explosive, it's like, why? Something broke down. So our execution level has got to increase just across the board. And so, we're there's always the balance of, you try to create explosives and then you put yourself at risk of turnovers. And controlling the ball, making sure you're playing to your defense, all those things come into play. We know that we're going to have to be explosive on offense and figure out ways to do that. And so I think during the bye week we've been able to look at the things that we've done well and the areas we got to get better at. Everybody's involved with the run game. It's not an easy thing, and I think it's been good. Has it been great? No, it hasn't been great. We can get better. I think that's everybody involved, including the quarterback, the receivers, the tight ends, the running backs, and obviously the offensive line. So all areas that we want to get better at in terms of being explosive, being efficient. But I say to the running backs a lot, like the first 4 yards are for the team, and then the rest of it, you got to go trust your God-given ability. And so some of the things in the last game. They put an extra guy in the box, and the RPO led us to throw the ball. Those don't show up in the running statistics, but when you have a quarterback who has the ability to run, you saw him pull. We read an end. We'll do some more of that with Julian. But he also can read some off the line defenders, and so like when you look at the running statistics, we look at them just a little bit different because. If they're leaving one-on-one on the outside and put an extra guy in the box and we're hitting, an 8-yard hitch to Jeremiah, that's really the run game, because it complements. So to answer your question, it's been good. It hasn't been great. We need to get better at it. We want to create more explosives.
The Buckeyes' 2024 national championship season was their third this century. And after the last two, 2003, 2015, both of those year afters, there's a little bit of a hangover maybe. Both of those teams had their seasons kind of fall flat. So how have this year's Buckeyes avoided that kind of a hangover and that kind of just sort of a letdown week even so far this season?
Well, the first thing about football is you only have so many opportunities. So, we have 12 that are guaranteed. That's it. And we work really hard around here to have those opportunities. And these guys have worked their entire life for these opportunities, and nothing's guaranteed in life. If we didn't learn anything from this past week, nothing's guaranteed. So we have to live every day like it's our last game. That's the way we have to look at it. And And so we have to be in the moment, and we have to master the process of week in and week out. And the test is on Saturday. And so you've heard me say it before, again, not flashy, but like being disciplined enough to continually do it week in and week out and being consistent. So that's the message. Not easy, but I think our guys are up for the challenge. But it all comes down to the way we train. That's why 2 hours from now we got to have a great meeting. We got to get going. We got to have a great practice, and then we'll get an idea what's going to happen this week. But we have to continue to upgrade as players. We have to upgrade as coaches. We have to upgrade as teams. In terms of offense, defense, and special teams, and then we have to continue to play really, really hard. And that's it. I mean, there's nothing magical about it. And people are going to say, "What's the key to this game?" Well, taking care of the football. Stopping and running the ball. I mean, those things aren't changing. It's a society that wants something new, wants something that's flashy, but it's those things that are going to make the difference in the end. So we have to keep bringing it to the table every week and be consistent.
Now, several questions in a row related to former Ohio State and current Penn State defensive coordinator Jim Knowles. This is not the first time Ryan Day has had to replace a defensive coordinator. He's actually made 4 defensive coordinator hires over his time. He brought in Jeff Hafley for his first season, and then brought in Kerry Combs for the next 2, and then brought in Jim Knowles for the next 3. And then this time, it's Matt Patricia. So what has Ryan Day learned through that process of hiring 4 different defensive coordinators, and how has his thought process changed as he's gone through that process so many times now?
You learn every year, and I think people ask me a lot, when every year, what have you learned the most? One of the top 3 things is when you make hires. I think maybe early on, you'd make decisions based on a recruit or 2, or maybe the public sentiment, where you got to do what's best for your team, and I think continuity is important, but we also got to do what's best. But there also is another part of it too, and the guys have to feel like you're doing everything you possibly can to make sure you're bringing in the best guy to help them. And whether it is somebody that people around the program, because again, you talk about fans, you talk about the boosters, you talk about people in the building, you talk about parents of recruits, you talk about the players, their parents. Everybody has opinions on all those things, and nowadays people can decide to come and go, through the transfer portal. So we have to take all those things into consideration when we're making a hire. But at the end of the day, we have to make the best hire for Ohio State, period. And I watched, Coach Saban was really good at it, in my opinion. All of those great runs that he made each year, he would have guys picked off of his staff, and then he was very thorough about how he hired the next one. And I'm sure he would say, some were better than others, but making sure that in that moment we're not rushing in to make a decision. And I think you saw that with Matt. There was a lag time between when Jim left and when we hired Matt, where I think a lot of people were like, man, he's going to hire one here pretty soon, But it left us in a tough spot because the hiring cycle was already sort of done, and so it was so late. But the fact that Matt was available, man, it ended up being a home run. And so just being thorough and making sure we're doing what's right by the players. I think getting some of their feedback is important. Talking to Caleb, talking to Sonny, what do you guys think about this? And then the last part, which is probably the most important part, is getting the feedback of the assistant coaches. Because, Tim, James, Larry, Matt, they have to work with whoever this guy is who comes in. And that's probably the part that maybe isn't getting recognized enough. Because, yeah, Jim did a great job last year. Matt's doing a great job this year. But what's the common denominator? Those coaches and the players. So I think we have the best defensive coaching staff in America, and I think sometimes, they don't get recognized enough. Not that, we're in it to get recognized, but those guys have put the work in behind the scenes, and they're doing a great job. So it's a long answer, but that's kind of some of the things that went into it.
With Jim Knowles coming to town this weekend, it is a very natural time to have conversations about the differences between this year and last year on the defense. So how is it that the Ohio State defense is better this year, having lost 8 starters off of last year's team? What is Matt Patricia doing schematically or maybe personally to get the results that he is?
Well, I think it's all the above, and we still have a lot of football to play. So the story's yet to be told, but I think it's a simple answer. It's not easy to do, but you have to build trust. And how do you build trust? I think, for Matt coming in, he had a certain level of credibility because of his past and his resume. But when he came in and he let his personality go and he connected with the people in the building, I think that's, early on what gave him some early wins. And then, we played well early in the season, and there was belief there, and then there was confidence built in. And so, that combined with Sonny, Caleb, KJ, Caden, IGB, guys who had been it before that can bring guys along and make them better, which I think is a sign of a really good player when they make others better. And I think that has had a huge part of this. When Jalen's next to Caleb, he feels stronger. When Lorenzo's next to Jermaine, they feel stronger together. When Arvell's next to Sonny, he feels stronger. Now that we're halfway through the season, I think that we know what we have with these guys, and they have confidence, and now they're bringing other people along. But then the other part of it is the staff, and these guys work hard, and Matt puts together the plan and does a great job. But those are the guys that are, on the front lines fighting the battles every day to make sure that their guys are great out champions.
Earlier, I kind of spelled out the read between the lines for you on one of these questions. I'm going to let you do that all by yourself here. How would Ryan Day describe his relationship with Jim Knowles and the relationship of the entire program with Jim Knowles right now?
Yeah, when, like any relationship, when it breaks off, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but there really hasn't been much communication. He did a great job when he was here, helped us win a national championship, and kind of left it at that. And then it was, hey, we got to go make a replacement and move on from there. So, that's kind of how it is. And it was abrupt, but we certainly respect the work that he did when he was here.
And finally, I mentioned at the start, one of the great press conference questions of several years at Ohio State. There are a lot of questions over the course of the years and a lot of press conferences. This is one that people will probably be talking about for a while. This is from Dave Holmes at ABC6. He asked about a Facebook post that showed Ryan Day going through a corn maze of his own face. The farm made the corn maze and carved it into the shape of Ryan Day's face. So did he really go through a corn maze of his own face with his family last weekend, or was that another AI-generated fake Facebook post?
I've read a lot of things on the internet, AI, that are not true. So I would say that it's hitting about 20%, but that actually is true. We actually that's been something we've been doing as a family yearly, and the folks out there at the corn maze had said, every year they do a corn maze and they use somebody different. It was Jack Nicholas one year. They've done Ohio State theme for however many years. And they said, you win a national championship, then, we'll do one of you. And so they held up their end of the bargain. So we went out there for a little while. I tried to be normal as a family. It wasn't normal because the kids were throwing corn at each other when we were in the maze and everything else. But but it was great. And it's great to do things like that when we're in the Woody during the season, just to get away even for a couple hours, because, we call it the submarine right here. Like, this is where we are. We don't go out in public. We don't do much. But to hear the people there talk about how, we're glad that Ohio State's on a bye week because we got a lot more people here. And then when they're playing, on Saturdays, there's nobody here. And it's a great opportunity to get an idea of kind of, how important football is in the community. But yeah, it was good to get a little bit of perspective walking away for at least for a couple hours anyways. I didn't do the haunt though. Although I did a couple years ago, and we were going through the haunt, and it's quite an experience. And at one point, somebody with a mask jumps up right here, and they're like, "Coach Day?" I was like, "Man, I got to get the heck out of here." So I said, "I'm going to pass this year, let the kids do it." And Nina and I waited, so.
There you go. A little personality from Ryan Day. And I'm also going to do a little reading between the lines for you here. This is that was a rather relaxed Ryan Day this week. We have seen stressed out Ryan Day. Ryan Day's been a little more relaxed overall this year. That was a relatively relaxed Ryan Day this weekend as well. We'll see how that translates to the field on Saturday. Buckeyes and Penn State Nittany Lions kicking off at noon on Fox. Should be a fun day out at the Horseshoe. We'll be there to cover it all for you at BuckeyeHuddle.com and YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Have our usual pregame show, live postgame show, all coming for you on YouTube. So make sure, if you've not done so already, make sure you take a second, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. And we don't ask this often enough. If you like these shows on your podcast platform of choice, take a second, give us a 5-star rating and review. That helps other folks find these shows through the magic of these algorithms. I don't know. They tell me it works, so I'm sure it works. So leave us a 5-star rating and review. And if you enjoy them, let another Buckeye fan in your life know, hey, you should check out this podcast or the Buckeye Weekly podcast or the Skull Session Recruiting podcast. Whatever you like, share it with your friends. We appreciate the help getting the word out. So that'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.